Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at the 2026 writehive Annual Conference and this panel on Representation Matters, Bridging Creative Gaps. My name is Hien Nguyen, and I will be having a conversation with the amazing writers Marie Wood, E.M. Anderson, Arini Vlotman, and Annie McCann. I'd love our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their work, so I can go in order of my screen, which is E, L, Arini, and then Annie.
Hi there, I'm E.M. Anderson. My pronouns are they, she. I am an autistic, ADHD, disabled, non-binary queer writer. I think that covered everything. And I mostly write fantasy. My current books are The Keeper of Lonely Spirits, The Remarkable Retirement of Edna Fisher, which is currently out of print, and the upcoming The Lord of the Wood, which releases in like 10 days from this panel airing.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm Marie Wood. I'm a psychological horror author. I write psychological horror novels, stories. I just edited my 35th book, so I guess I can definitely call me a novelist. Short stories, poetry, screenplays. I write pretty much everything. The only thing I have not written is a graphic novel, so I'm working on that. Um, I am the president of the Horror Writers Association, and I look forward to this conversation because I think it's a really, really important one.
Hi everyone, my name is Arini Vlotman. I am a contemporary rom-com writer living in the tip of Africa, South Africa, and I thoroughly enjoy the process of writing and putting my books out there, getting my story told. That's me.
Hi, everybody. My name's Annie McCann. I am the author of My Harimau King, which is a time travel middle grade fantasy that starts in Western Sydney, where I live in Australia, the land down under, and transports back in time to the ancient kingdom of Pajajaran, which is the ancient kingdom of West Java, Indonesia, where my mother's from. So I am an Indonesian Australian Muslim author living in Sydney or Western Sydney, in the land down under of Australia. Oh, and I love writing and I love reading, and I'm also an MC when I'm not doing those things as well.
Excited for this conversation. And so, to kick off our first question, why is representation important in the content we consume in various media? And what is your assessment of the current publishing or overall media landscape when it comes to representation?
I hold hope as well. Personally, for me, I can speak from a culturally, linguistically diverse background as somebody who, being Indonesian Australian, growing up in the western suburbs of Sydney, never saw any representation at all of an Indonesian character in fiction, despite the fact that Indonesia are our neighbors. And the only time you would ever hear or see Indonesia is, oh, have you been to Bali? That was essentially the only conversation you would have. And the only time you would see any form of Indonesian representation or Muslim representation at that was in a textbook. And why is it important? I'll give you a very quick scenario and then I'll give you my answer. So, when I was 8 years old, I was in primary school being dropped off by my white father, who was Australian Muslim of Irish ancestry. No one ever saw my mum, and there was a stereotype that you looked a certain way if you were Muslim. So here I am in class, the teacher's asking, so it's Ramadan. Who's observing Ramadan, the fasting month in the Islamic calendar? I put my hand up because I'm a Muslim. And the teacher, primary school teacher, looked at me in the eye and said, Annie McCann, you are not Muslim. Put your hand down. I was mortified. 8 years old, having been born Muslim, grown up in the western suburbs of Sydney, I was absolutely mortified that my teacher would think I wasn't Muslim. And she didn't even ask, are you Muslim? It was no, flat out, you cannot be Muslim because your father is white and he dropped you to school. And there was no indication that it could be anything else. So I reflect on that moment a lot. And to me, when I see a school teacher having that response, that tells me there's a gap. There is a huge gap in our knowledge base somewhere. And why representation is very important is because it bridges these gaps that we have, not necessarily through textbooks or being preachy, but through literature, through TV, film, media, the content we consume. The representation is incredibly accurate, not just to bridge those gaps, but to dispel myths. And I can tell you, as a Muslim growing up and living in the Western world, it hasn't been easy. In a world that lacked representation, or worse, in media had misrepresentation, it leads to the rise of negative perceptions and misconceptions and stereotypes being created. And it often leaves individuals feeling isolated or invisible. And having inclusion or accurate and authentic voices and representation in our media, particularly in books, it moves to break down those stereotypes. It enables that mutual respect, that understanding. So you don't have those kind of responses in a classroom where you could not possibly be a certain person or a certain belief because of the way you look. And it also validates everybody. You can't be what you can't see. And, as many authors have said, growing up, you haven't seen yourself in a book. Therefore, that was the trigger point to write something for yourself or your 8-year-old self. Validates, who you are. Authentic representation, it influences that mindset. It creates a safe space and creates a safe world where everybody has a seat at the table. And I think whilst work has been done and agreed that some work has been done in TradPub, it's still a tick box exercise in TradPub, unfortunately. But in the indie space and the small press and the self-publishing space, it's booming. And it's, these conversations are coming to the forefront like never before. And it's got to a point where everyone's reflecting on their own experiences and thinking, you know what, if we had these books growing up, or there was some sort of representation, authentic voice, we probably would have had a very different experience, which is why we've started. I think, well, for me personally, that was why I wrote my Honey Mile King, because, I, looked everywhere for some form of Indonesian representation, a Muslim representation, where there was a hijabi on the front cover of a book or a story that wasn't affiliated to a negative headline. And I was sort of, a year ago today when my book came out, finally having that on the shelf, finally having that seat at the table to change that narrative.
I think that when we think about representation, it means a lot of things. It's not just, gender. It's not just, the being unique, as I'm making air quotes. I know you can't see them all, but it's being unique in the genre that you write, especially from mine. I mean, horror is, has always been largely male, right? There was back in the day when people would say that women don't read horror, which was nonsense. I was reading horror. I wasn't the only one reading horror. And women don't write horror, which is also nonsense. Have you never heard of Anne Radcliffe and Mary Shelley? So we definitely have been here, but it's easy to think of it only in these little pockets of, okay, women, okay, African American, race, or just any race. Well, okay, this, okay, that. It's all of it together. Because as a person who may not be the mainstream, which in my genre is white male, just to be frank, the representation of all of the things that make me up are important because they don't exist in this space, even now, all these years later. I mean, I look back and I think I've been writing for a long time. I mean, I guess I've been writing since I was 5, but I started like publishing late 90s or so. And so I look at that time period and it's so much better. But the fact that we still need a Women in Horror Month is important. The fact that we still need a Black, creator in horror month, or Black a speculative fiction month, that we still need these months in a general sense to celebrate uniqueness, if you will, is troublesome. That I would even describe it as uniqueness is troublesome. It should just be mainstream. And so I think that the representation is very important until we can get to the point where everyone can see that everyone's creating the same kind of stuff and it's all impactful in its own way. We're in this space and we have to be, diligent about trying to make sure that we're seen.
Yeah, for sure. I think so to answer the second part of that question first and to jump off of what you said, like it just what you were talking about, like representation in various genres and how there's still not really enough of it. It made me think of how many readers who at least supposedly want to read diversely, but they're like, well, I just can't find books by those authors in this genre. And I think those books exist a lot more than they used to, but you have to
Mhm.
be willing to do the work to go find them. Like you have to go look up like horror novels by women or by Black women or like whatever it is you're trying to add to your bookshelf. I mean, a lot of people have done that work for you already, actually. Like you
Right,
can find
right.
lists of these books. So I think they are like there's in terms of the publishing landscape, I think that more books by a variety of authors exist, but they're not always well advertised, so you have to be willing to like go look for them. And then in terms of representation being important, speaking as someone who did not realize until adulthood that I was queer and genderqueer and neurodivergent, like I literally got my autism and ADHD diagnoses last July. And this has obviously been like my whole life. but I only got diagnosed last July. So speaking as someone coming to my own identity sort of late, I think representation is important because if you like, I didn't see queer and non-binary people in stories when I was younger, and I feel like if I had, that might have helped me figure that out a lot sooner. And like similarly to the neurodivergence, like if I had read more stories about them when I was younger, maybe I would have been like, oh, is that what this is? And just understanding that you're not alone and that there are other people with those experiences. So I think
Mhm.
that's why representation is important in a general sense.
That's a really good point you just made because we look to media, right, to see and learn and all. It's our escapism, but it's also our barometer, right? So if you don't see yourself in this or see something that says, oh, when you're reading, you're not necessarily going to identify with you'll know something's happening with you, but you'll think it's just you and not
Yeah.
know, that no, you're not alone at all. There's so many people who are experiencing that, but it's the reflection. And we grew up reading one perspective. Really? You had to seek out women. I mean, if you found Anne Rice, you were lucky. And speaking from horror. And once you did, you were in. I mean, you were completely in at that point. But if you didn't find her work, you just thought, okay, the only options are these guys. And it's good stuff. I like it, but it's not giving you the perspective of what a woman will come to the table with, or what someone who's non-binary comes to the table with. We need all of these perspectives because the stories are important and they're different. They're not just the same. So I really think that no, that's a really good point. I teach composition, but I also teach creative writing. And if you don't mind, I might want to make that perspective, that connection, because that was
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of yeah. I really liked it. It's important. We have to see ourselves, and you just gave me another reason why. you know.
It's a question that I have multiple answers for, but
Mm.
I'm just going to put it this way. So imagine, if you will, a 10-year-old little girl in South Africa, Indian, South African, not born in India, born in South Africa, third generation. I was consuming books, inhaling them from the library, and watching whatever was on TV. I think at that stage we had like 3 channels to watch. So a very narrow experience of the world. Never once in my life did I imagine. No, it wasn't even an idea, not even a possibility, to see myself represented in a book. It was never a possibility. 10 years later, I was 20, still not. Maybe in my 20s and then eventually in my 30s. And now I'm 42 and I'm writing those books and I'm seeing them come out. So, from my lived experience, I firmly believe that it is authenticity. It is the stories that give us life. It makes us feel seen and heard. Within the publishing landscape, I mean, that's tricky. There's not as much progress as I think there should be. And this is based on a number of complexities and the decisions that we don't really see on our side of things. But I am seeing more of, like, the indie space representation everywhere. Like, my TBR is huge. Trad, not so much. I do think that they are giving into their own negative cycle, and I'm hoping that the editors that are going in there, the literary agents that are going in there, are representing us and are putting a call out for us. So there is hope.
Like, how would you define good or effective representation, and why does it matter?
I love that question so much because
Mm.
in writing, in art, we say, well, everything is subjective. The way you tell a story is subjective. The way you absorb a story is subjective. I don't think that we should have gray areas when it comes to good representation. It has to be, and I talked about authenticity, but to be represented on any scope, that we're talking about ableism, race, culture, country, anything that we LGBTQ plus, that entire landscape has to be authentic. It has to be complex because there's texture in our stories, and the assumptions, like what Annie was saying, when her teacher made this assumption on her behalf and spoke up to her and made her the teacher's assumptions her own, to a primary school child. This is something that I am so, um like like right now I can't even form my words because it really upsets me because we are given the impression that we, as writers, we are representing our space. But if you look at the three of us, we all have different lived experiences. I may be Indian, South African. I've never been to India. I have lived in this country. My parents were born here, and an immigrant, an Indian immigrant in the UK or Australia or anywhere else in the country in the world is going to have a different experience. But what we need to bring to the table is authenticity and the ability to weave the narrative that doesn't fall into the stereotype, right? But is still real and lived. So if somebody reads my story or my stories, they should be able to say, oh, I actually see how that's different. There's certain cultural nuances in your country. If you were setting, my stories, my romances are set here in South Africa because I firmly believe that we have a beautiful landscape to cover. So it boils down to not being put, not putting pressure on ourselves to represent the whole because we can't. There's space for, I mean, there's Desi authors. There are so many of us. Like, I'm so proud of how many of us there are in the different spaces. And we need to be honest. So honest in our telling of the characters, honest in the telling of our stories, even though it is fiction. Fiction, I firmly believe, should be fun. We should be having an amazing time with it. If we're not enjoying what we're writing and reading, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. But I mean, I am not going to fake my experiences to make somebody else feel comfortable. And at the end of the day, I think good representation is diverse. I was with a bunch of authors. We did an anthology last year. We were given one prompt by the editor, and we wrote the most insanely different stories, short stories across different landscapes, universes, different names. Some had even different languages because we can never write the same thing. We are all writing what we are representing for our own lived experiences. And I think that cycle a cat is broken often, and we are forced to pigeonhole ourselves. And these types of conversations are taking us out of those pigeonholes. So
I think what's good representation is such a sticky question because, like, you can see feedback even within a community, where sometimes people are like, well, this representation's bad because it didn't speak to my specific experience. Which is kind of like, well, okay, but people with your same identity aren't a monolith, so not everyone's going to have the same experience, and it might speak to the author's experience. But on the other hand, like, the call can definitely come from inside the house regarding like unexamined stereotypes and internalized prejudices about like your own community. So generally speaking, this is so broad, but I think representation that's been written thoughtfully and without leaving stereotypes and other issues unexamined probably counts as good, but like your mileage may vary because one reader might be like, this is the best representation of my own identity ever, and then another reader will be like, this is terrible representation, why was this book even published? So I think it's very subjective and personal, but I think as long as you're doing it like thoughtfully and you are examining those stereotypes and not just like taking them at face value, it's probably at least a good attempt at representation.
I think there's no good or bad, to be honest. You can't, things are all reflective of the time. Like, okay, for example, blaxploitation. Some of those movies are cringeworthy and oh my God, I can't believe but these are movies that were made for a specific audience, for an audience of people who did not ever see themselves reflected on film in any light other than, the negatives. So when you think about it's what is it, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but what's the oh, I can't remember the blaxploitation version of that, or Dr. Black or something and Mr. something. But it was like there's a blaxploitation version of that. But you're seeing Black scientists, Black doctors, Black business owners in that movie. We didn't see that. That was not the way that Black people were portrayed. Is it cringeworthy? Yeah, a lot of, like I said, blaxploitation can be really rough to watch, but it's groundbreaking stuff. So is it bad? No. Are the 80s movies, where you have like, I mean, some of the best ones were cringeworthy, right? I mean, if you think about the times, you have to think about what's representative of the times. just thinking about movies that were in the 90s and connecting it to what we have now, what we do now in the world. Some of that is a little, embarrassing. Some of that, the whole HR thing exists because of the work that people did in the 90s in their offices. And it doesn't mean anything negative. It just looks negative now. But back then, that was not the way that it was perceived. So should we then not have had a movie that reflected women as CEOs because the movie's cringeworthy because of something that happened that was commonplace back then? No. So representation is important. We just have to look at it with the lens that it's calling for. Every generation has a whole different set of, expectations and perspectives. And we have to be able to look at all of the representation from those standpoints honestly and pull out the stuff that's important. I'd rather watch a woman that's a CEO of a business doing something completely ridiculous that today she would never ever do than never have had that shown on film for someone to say, hey, I could be a CEO. So we just have to think about how we're approaching the media and when the media was produced.
Yeah, actually, so Friends is like one of my shows that I watch on a cycle. Like it air like my mom watched it when it aired, so it's like a comfort show for me. And I think of that actually every time I watch it because on one hand, in many ways it's like a deeply homophobic show, but on the other hand, it had a lesbian wedding on TV on a major TV show.
Yep.
And stated outright that it makes God happy to bring two people together in love, any two people. Like that was a very big deal. And I'm like watching the show and I'm like, I know by today's standards, like this is just rife with homophobia overall, but that was very important that it showed a lesbian wedding on TV.
I mean, I went to Howard University. So, and when we look at A Different World, the show came on right after the Cosby Show. It was always, they're doing Hillman College. That is reflective of an HBCU. So that's my life. That's what my life was like. I mean, not all of it, but most of it. It really hit some really strong notes. Other folks that had no idea what an HBCU was in general and what it might look like and how it's different from other universities. So if A Different World hadn't come on, it was wonderful to be able to see that and say it couldn't influence me because I was already there, but it was exciting to be like, yeah, that's right. That's how we are. I hope we get more students. People didn't know that kind of thing could exist. And it's important to show that because it's not just, it's so many things. We can talk about that all day. That's a whole nother panel, but the whole concept of Black excellence is shown through that lens first. What it showed is important to people because you have to be able to see either what you aspire to or who you actually are and don't realize that it's okay to be. And we look for that validation. Every single person looks for some kind of validation, and the media is the way to do it. So no, I think I definitely think that it's important to, we have to take it with a grain of salt, but it's what it is.
There's a couple of things, like a couple of touchstones that I'd like to touch on there myself, actually. So, first of all, with fiction or fantasy fiction that I love reading and writing myself, my book being middle grade fiction, fantasy fiction, you can explore very important themes through a fantasy lens. TVs do it, TV shows do it, books do it. And in my case, with My Harimau King, it's the first time in the Western world we've seen not just Indonesian representation, but our character, who was loosely based on me, being Indonesian Australian Muslim from Western Sydney. That's never been seen before. So this is written from my own experiences in terms of being a mixed cultured kid growing up in Western Sydney, where you had those experiences of people not believing who you are because you didn't look a certain way. But also on the flip side, where I've actually experienced myself, you can't be Indonesian, your skin's too white. But I'm more Indonesian than a lot of the other Indonesians who say I'm not Indonesian because they don't speak the language, they don't understand the culture. So there's that sort of birth of a third race where I'm thinking, well, where do I sit? Being Indonesian Australian, I'm neither one or the other, I'm both. So that's when I thought it was a bit of an identity crisis, I think, at one stage, because I didn't find anything I could connect with growing up until I realized when I started reading and writing, I've been given a gift, limited edition. You're a mixed kid, it's you've been given a gift, and own it basically. And so it's one of the things I'm probably most proud of is I've got the best of both worlds, where I live in Australia, I've got family across borders, I speak 3 languages, and that's more than what a lot of people who have put me down in the past have done. And it's incredibly important to see that shine through literature and like in books, fantasy or rom-com, whatever it is that you're writing, because it proves or shows that authentic voice. It relates or shows the world we actually live in. Because if we don't write these stories, then colonial history will take over and it will erase our identity. It will erase the stories. One of the unfortunate things with Indonesian culture is that a lot of the information is not captured. It was passed on through pantun, which is oral history. So when I was writing my book, my Harimau King, which captures my family legend of Prabu Raja Siliwangi, and who's my royal ancestor, and his affiliation with the tiger Harimau. A lot of that information I had to actually consult with my late uncle and my cousins and my family and my mum, who know these stories firsthand, and other short stories that I've written that capture the legends of West Java. The same thing, I had to consult with my family because a lot of these legends were captured through pantun, not in the written word. And for the longest time, we believe certain things because we haven't been told otherwise. Whereas when you have authentic voices shining through, even through fiction, it changes that narrative. It shifts that story, shifts that beliefs. And like I mentioned before, influences that mindset. If all we're going by is what's in the media that's misrepresenting, or all we're going by is a world where we don't have a seat at the table, then there's no connection. It's not reflecting the world that we're in, and identities get erased, and stories are basically put in the trunk forever.
And I think we've answered some of it, does representation always need to be positive? And how do you approach writing messy, complicated, and flawed characters?
Being a horror author, I love those, right? I mean, I don't want you to always like my character. What I want you to do is have an emotional connection to the character. So I think ultimately, when we think about it like that, if you are engaged and invested, you don't always like that character. That's good. So it's always important to impact the reader or the viewer. Positive or negative is really not the point. I don't think that's the point for me. So when we talk about it, so sometimes when we talk about representation, we get mired in the whole stereotypical piece, and this is a stereotype that, and I don't like that. Of course, I don't like to see certain ways that Black people are depicted on film, or certain ways that Black mothers are depicted on film. Recently, there was a couple movies that kind of really break my heart. But is it true? Yeah, some of it is. Sure, not all of it, but some of it is. It's a story to be told. That story's probably about overcoming, and we maybe someone needed to see that. But I don't think that we should shy away from the negative, as long as we're not just diving into stereotypes because they're easy to do and they're fun and you think it's great to show this negative side. That's horrible. Just doing it for the sake of showing a negative is not right. But in terms of reading and character development, things like that, I don't think that it's important that I make a character that's lovey-dovey. But again, that's my genre. I don't need you to love my character all the time. Sometimes the villain is the best character in the movie. I just don't think that the positive or negative piece is as important, at least not for me.
So I think there's a difference between writing just like a stereotyped version of a character versus writing like a messy, flawed character who's not necessarily likable. So I think as long as you're right, like you're not just stereotyping them to make them unlikable and then that's the whole thing, I think it's probably fine. I mean, people are messy and flawed and complicated, and not everyone is going to like every character anyway, no matter how likable you think you've made them. And on the flip side, if any Remarkable Retirement of Edna Fisher fans are watching, I have a bunch, like my villain is named Redway, and he's like building an army of fans. Like there are just people who read the book who think he is like baby girl and they love him and they're like, he's just misunderstood. And I'm like, kinda, but also like he's killed a bunch of people. So like I disagree with you. So like there was a character that I wasn't even trying to make likable. I mean, I wasn't trying to make him just evil for the hell of it because it's not the kind of villain I like to write. But I did not expect people to be like, ooh, we love him. It's almost like not worth worrying about because readers are going to connect with characters how they do, and you don't have a lot of control over that at the end of the day.
For me personally, I feel a positive representation of oneself, whether it's culture, whether it's, LGBTIQA or disability and the like, is where it's accurate. That's how I see positive representation, is where it's an accurate representation of the person or of the voice telling that story. It goes into negative. I call it negative when it's, as it's been mentioned, misrepresented or completely way off the mark. I've read books in the past that had minimal representation of Muslim characters or the Muslim belief, but I won't mention the name of the book. But there was one book I was mortified when I read this book, where the author actually said Muslims worship tigers in a conversation, and I, as a Muslim reader, I'm thinking, we do not do that. Clearly this person didn't do their research, they didn't consult, there was no sensitivity reading behind this manuscript, and yet it went through publication and it's been out for a number of years. And so that to me is where it gets negative. At the end of the day, as it's been said, we are human and human lives are messy. They're not meant to be perfect. If you want to read perfect, read a fairy tale where, it's a happily ever after. But when you're writing authentic voice, the positive representation is where it's accurate and it keeps it real and it brings it to life. It's positive when it's thought provoking. It's positive when it breaks down your stereotypes, where it shifts the narrative of a news headline, where, the way, because let's face it, news in media is a controlled narrative. And the way media can deliver headlines can create those stereotypes. When a positive representation comes through literature that breaks that stereotype, that's when you know it's a positive representation. It's accurate, it's real, and it brings to life exactly the lived experience of that particular person where it breaks down that stereotype. Doesn't have to all mean fluffy, happily ever after. It's that positive, accurate representation of the person.
I think we need to, so we defined what good means to us and what it means, what it should mean to everybody. As long as so positive, I'm going to assume is constructive, and like shiny and nice and what everybody wants to see, but that's not reality. When and we're going to go, I think Anya and I and you have said this a few times, authenticity and lived experience. And our lived experience is not just from based on what the panelists said and our stories here. We have very messy lives, and it's not necessarily positive representation, but it is telling people, it is describing the world to other people. It's helping them understand what diversity actually means. And I get this very, very often is because I have a standard little blurb that I give to my agent and my publishers and all of that. This is who I am. If you had to give me 50 words to describe myself. But I'm not actually just that person. I'm not just the South African Desi female writing romance stories. There's a lot to me. There's a lot to my readers. There's a lot to my culture and my country and my religion and my family and my extended family and the authors that I write with. So when I think we should be accurately portraying representation with the knowledge that whoever reads our stories should have an accurate picture of what is going on. Now, that is also a little bit conflicting because I'm writing fiction, I'm writing rom-coms, contemporary romances, and that's not always possible. But I'm not going to fall into the stereotypes. I'm not going to fall into the pigeonholes. I'm not going to fall into the expectations of what everybody is used to. So the first, whenever somebody from a different country or a different background reads one of my books, there's two things I hear. It's like, oh, it's so interesting to read a book set in South Africa. And I didn't know Africa was like this. And the second thing is about an Indian living in South Africa, because my female characters are usually Indian. And those two things just bring me so much of joy. Like I want to shout to the rooftops when I hear that, because it means that there's somebody else who has just gotten a different perspective and knows that we can have fun. I just want to have fun. I just want to have a good time. So the positive side of things is just being able to diversely tell our stories without being pigeonholed and without misrepresenting. I think the misrepresenting is important.
To dive into some specific questions on all your books, we'll start with Elle. Your book, If It's the Birds We're in Trouble, has a really interesting structure where you use a lot of non-traditional media, like case files, letters, notes, and public records. Could you talk a little bit about your research process in developing this story and how research can also be another aspect of representing stories authentically?
Yes and no, right? So I'm a pantser. So the planning of the story is really loosey-goosey, I have to be frank. writing an epistolary novel or novella is a challenge, and there's literally no narrative structure at all. By the way, this comes out on the 6th, by the way, June 6th. Like, so I'm very excited about that. But the research was just being aware, to be honest with you. It is, as an African American woman, I don't have to go looking for that, right? I understand myself. I understand, like you mentioned, we're not monoliths. No one's a monolith. No group is a monolith. So I can do it several different ways as a woman, as a human being, as a Black woman, as just whatever, as a Black author, as all these different things. I can respond to whatever I'm throwing into the story. So writing the emails and the news clippings that were in there, and some of those the social media stuff was a lot of fun. And that was some research, because that's a lot of fun. If you ever read the comments on like a Instagram video, just read the comments. It's better sometimes than the video. But if you look at that, it was a study in the way that we behave. And I don't know what anyone's race is. I don't know what their gender is. I mean, by and large, their username doesn't show me that. So I was able to pull that piece of it away, which was really fun, and let me just be a human and not all these other things that I am. I could just be a person out in the world. The one thing that we would have had in common is that we looked at the same video. Whatever it was interested us. So that's the common factor. And it pulled all the other stuff. And so the representation itself didn't need to be as individualistic, which was nice. So I did a lot on that one. I did a whole lot of just soul searching as a person, as opposed to anything racial. I did look at a couple things that were race specific or gender specific or whatever. And it didn't give me anything that was better or worse, than just looking at it from the just being a human being out here searching the internet and fooling around aspect. And that was kind of refreshing, to be honest with you, because so often you get stuck in those conversations that are about race or about gender, and they don't always apply to the thing we're talking about, but people are infusing the conversation that way. It was nice to be able to find stuff that really didn't matter and write stuff that didn't matter to that. This is how a human would react if this happened to them in front of them. So that was the roundabout answer was, when I said yes and no, I know you were like, what are you talking about? But it makes sense now, I hope, at least, because it was pulled away, it was stripped away, and that is the refreshing part.
So to jump into your book, E, in The Lord of the Wood, your authors note outlines that the book deals with homophobia and ableism, both internalized and external, and this is not a queer normative world. Could you talk about your choice of these isms being prevalent in the story and why it was important?
Yeah, so on a surface level, it's it's like a fantasy world, but it's like sort of a fake 1910. So if we transpose that on the real world, like disabilities rights movement has not happened yet, like Stonewall hasn't happened yet, like those things just haven't happened yet. It's weird to say that because they don't happen in this world because this is not the real world. But so that's part of it, is just like the time that I used as inspiration for the setting, like just had those things more than the current world. It's so hard to say that right now. Everything's just under attack. So it's hard to say, oh, it had it more back then. But I'm like, no, it really still did have more. We still have a ways to go till we get that bad again. And then speaking specifically to the village that the two viewpoint characters are from, it's a brother and sister are the viewpoints. It's like a small fishing village turned reluctant factory town. It's economically hard up. And so people are sort of looking to control what they can. And that includes the viewpoint characters. Like they're like, especially the sister, like she really is aware she has no control over life in general, but she really tries to do what she can to pretend she has control. So there are like strict gender roles, and a man is a man and a woman's a woman, and that's that. And disability is very prevalent in the setting because the people are working dangerous jobs. But despite that, their general attitude is like, oh, well, you have to live anyway, so you just kind of have to grit your teeth and press on. And if you can't press on for some reason, they look down on you. So like the sister who is like newly disabled, from an illness, like it's inspired by long COVID. It's technically not long COVID because COVID doesn't exist in this world, but it's inspired by long COVID. And like she's literally a healer. So she knows that she needs rest and that she needs to be taking care of herself, but she's really frustrated by the fact that she can't do all the things she used to do and or can't do them the same way she used to do. And meanwhile, her neighbors are kind of looking at her like, physician, heal thyself. Like they're like, why, like, why are you not doing as much? You should still be able to do everything even though you're disabled now. So there's a lot of that going on. And then the main character is gay and autistic, but doesn't know either of those things. He just kind of knows that he's different and that the people in town don't like him because he's different, but he doesn't understand why. So it really is a question of like, because there is no representation of these things, he just thinks that he's like weird and useless, and he's always trying to like be useful so that he'll have some value. And so like that's really a lot of it, is that it goes into their character arcs, because once they what so the basic premise is that the brother goes into the forest on like a business trip, like to travel to the city and like make a bunch of money for his family so that they can like relocate and have a better life and all that. And then, but it's an enchanted forest and he gets lost in the forest. And then his sister ends up going after him because nobody in the village, they're like, yeah, we're not risking our lives for that guy. You can go after him if you want. We're not doing it. And so in a sense, it's a little bit like the musical Into the Woods, where once they go into the forest, like all the same societal expectations and stuff aren't there because it's a forest and it doesn't care if you're disabled or queer, or like it doesn't, it just doesn't come up. And so in the forest they can start having these, like he meets the Lord of the Wood and he starts having like a queer awakening, and starts realizing that the way he is as an autistic person is okay. And his sister starts having like, she starts resting more, but she's not feeling guilty about it because she's like, hey, I'm not at home and I don't have chores to do and I don't have the kids to take care of and I don't have like people to answer to. So the forest kind of serves as a space to like kind of open up those isms for them and be like, hey, maybe we don't have to actually feel this way, even though other people in our lives think that we, feel this way about us or feel this way about themselves. Maybe we can be like, hey, the way I am is okay. It is very different for me. I usually do write queer norm worlds, and this one was not. So I was like, I better put that in the author's note because I don't want anyone jump scared by this,
Arini, Pretty Complicated is a rags to riches romance led by a morally gray heroine, Tara. What does it mean to you to write stories where heroines who don't look like the ones we get in mainstream media fall in love and get their happy endings?
So Tara made me very uncomfortable. She would make choices that I would never make. And every time I put her in a situation, where she put herself in a situation and she would make the morally gray choice. I would sit. It took me the longest time to write this book because I had totally flipped the script in terms of what it meant to be her and what was driving her to get what she wanted. And can you have so one of the stereotypes of the Indian community is that there are structures that we follow. You have to be the good Indian girl. You have to finish school, you have to go and study, you have to become a doctor, lawyer, teacher, get married, have 2.5 babies, give your family grandchildren. I mean, that is something that we believe sometimes in our own families. And Tara, here she comes, she doesn't have any of that. She was divorced, she went through a messy relationship, and somebody presents her with the opportunity of a lifetime. Like that was she gets willed a whole estate, and she has to work with somebody that she doesn't particularly like, and he doesn't like her, she doesn't like him. That does not stop her. She doesn't need to be liked, and she made choices that can still make her happy. She kind of fumbles through a lot of it because like how many of us actually know what we're doing. But the best part of writing her story was that I could give her this completely out of societal norm thinking. I could give that to her because this woman can exist somewhere. I'm sure there's tons of her in whatever race. I mean, with Annie and our cultural backgrounds, there are a lot of things that we have in common. Listening to our families and going back generations. I'm sure Annie, somebody in your family here, and you too. All three of our grannies or three generations could sit down and they would have a lot of common, and they would think that, oh, this is not actually this is not ideal, this is not great, can we just not do that a little bit? And here we are, and we can say we can absolutely do that. And the happily ever after, the romantic possibilities, writing is possibilities, fiction is possibilities, and giving Tara the possibility to do anything she wants to do by her rules, even though she is She does have these norms that she has to abide by. Like her mother isn't exactly happy with her in this book, but she decides that this is her life. She's going to do what she wants to do. She's going to have fun. She's going to have everything. At the end of it, she gets what she wants, and she works really, really hard for it. I don't know if I'd work that hard for what she did. But I think when you talk about messiness and complexity, and we're talking about diversity and representation and authenticity and lived experience, I can give my characters anything at the end of the day, and they decide whether it's worth fighting for. And when I write at the end, and I've got that epilogue where we see this fantastical experience come together, and she is glowing and he is glowing, and the mother's happy and the cousins are happy and the dog is happy, there's nothing more satisfying than that.
So Annie, in My Harimau King, Sumaya goes on a journey through time and space. It's a
Mhm.
delightful addition to the long history of portal fantasies in children's literature. Could you speak to writing an Indonesian portal fantasy specifically, and what was most important to you for this story?
Wow, what a great question. Thank you. First of all, it was such a delight to write My Harimau King. And truth be told, it started out as a short story because me being a short story background, it started off with a short story. And then 3,000, 4,000 words in, ooh, this story's not yet finished. There's much to go. Okay, then it turned into a book. Um, so in terms of writing the, Indonesian element to it, that part was incredibly important to me because I knew this was going to be the first time that Indonesia would be represented on the middle grade fantasy space. We have had representation in middle grade space before, but they were contemporary stories and phenomenal stories at that. I've read these stories written by other authors, or they're in the rom-com space, but this was the first time that it was going to be on a world stage in the middle grade fantasy space. It was very important for me to get that element right. Even though I had creative license, I still captured the legend of my family, which was Prabu Raja Siliwangi and his legend of the Harimau, and getting that right, understanding who he was as a person and that legend and what it means to the local people was very, very important because I felt a sense of responsibility because it wasn't just me writing a story, it was honoring his memory, it was honoring my ancestry, my culture, my family. So there was a heavy consultation with my family about that. And also written in such an authentic voice, too, where yes, it is in English, but there is dialogue between the characters in Bahasa Indonesian, but also the dialect of West Java, which is Bahasa Sunda. And it was very important for me to include that because people don't often know or recognize that, in Indonesia, it's an archipelago with thousands of islands making up the country, but 200 of those are inhabited, and those cultures are very different from one another. West Java is different to East Java, and even Java itself is different from Sumatra. So, language, culture, food, values, everything is it's very different from one to another, even though they're in the same country. So capturing the authenticity of my culture from a Sunda perspective, but also Bahasa Indonesia was very important when writing it through a fantasy lens. And the fantasy element, it's basically one of my absolute loves. I love reading fantasy fiction, particularly stories that are derived by cultural mythology, legends and folklore. So, basically putting those two elements together was, it was fun, but also vital for me to do it properly. Because I was hoping that this story wasn't just going to be the story I wish I had growing up, but it was also going to be accessible to Indonesian and non Indonesian readers, Muslim and non Muslim readers as well. You'll see on the front cover of my book, Sumaya Jackson, she is a hijabi girl and she's holding a kujang, which is a dagger that is a West Javanese dagger. It was very important to me to have a strong female character in a hijab on the front cover for me because I wanted to break that stereotype that Muslim women or Muslim girls are oppressed. My character, Sumaya Jackson, is very much like me. She's unapologetically Muslim. The story is not always fighting with your identity or wearing a hijab in the Western world. The struggle that I have as a hijabi is, am I going to get attacked tomorrow because of an Islamophobia attack? Like, that's the only worry I have. But I've never struggled with the fact that I was Muslim. It's something that I'm very proud of and something that I wanted to shine through that story in a fantasy setting as well. So capturing all of those elements was vital. And then seeing the success of that, I feel the most rewarding part of that journey is where a 7 or 8 year old kid would run up to me and tell me, I love this book because it had a Muslim character, and this is the first time I read a Muslim character in a fantasy book, or an Indonesian character that said, oh, this character's like me. I've never seen this before. And that's far more rewarding than hitting a bestsellers list, I have to tell you. Like, it really does touch my heart when I see that connection. And having that connection, that's why it was so important when I went through that journey in writing it. It was to capture it authentically, um, responsibly, and have something that was accessible from a wider audience, but readers from all over could connect to it in one way or another.
Even when I'm writing about my own community as a Vietnamese American author, I have some insecurities, right? Am I accidentally writing into stereotypes? Am I flattening my community for the reader? Do you ever deal with that type of insecurity? And what advice do you have for authors to kind of overcome or deal with that?
I have 100% because we see things from different perspectives. There's no two people that see things alike. And what is normal for me may not be normal for somebody else. And sometimes I wonder, have I slipped into a stereotype? And then I have to backtrack and I have to like investigate and think, okay, what is making me feel uncomfortable? Why am I doubting myself? What is the thing that the character is doing or thinking or going through that is making me doubt myself? And there's a little bit of it that is, just like the writer's brain and the constant imposter syndrome that we deal with. But whenever I get this like tight feeling in my chest, and I pause, because then it means that there's something valid there, and that being uncomfortable is not necessarily a bad thing. Like I talked about how Tara made me feel so uncomfortable. But all my FMCs in all my books make me uncomfortable to a slight extent because they're not me, right? But I go from one extreme to the other. Am I flattening the character or the culture or the race to explain them in the book? And if I'm doing that, why am I doing that? I don't need to do that. I cannot, like the when I'm building my characters and developing my characters, they have so much complexity and so much nuance. 90% of that is not on page, but it helps me understand the characters. So am I flattening them to explain them to somebody, and or to my readers or to my agent or to my publisher or to my editor or to whoever may potentially be reading the story? If that's a yes, I can literally lose my mind, because how did I end up in that situation? I'm like fulfilling my own low expectations, yeah. And then the other is, am I being over, or am I over nuancing it? Am I making the character or the situation too complex? And those are the two questions that I really gravitate from. It doesn't happen often enough that it stops me in my tracks. But if it didn't happen at all, like when you asked me that question, the first thing I thought about was, when did this happen? If it does not happen, then there's something wrong with my introspection, and there's something wrong with my awareness of representation and my awareness of the characters that I'm writing. So those are, and self-awareness is important. And then the third thing is, when in doubt, ask somebody for help. Just like go to my street team or go to another author and say, just please read the scene for me, or just read this chapter, or this is what I'm saying, but I don't quite know if because maybe in my perspective it's okay, but in somebody else's it's not. And I can only view things from from the perspective of my eyes and my experience. I usually am able to get it right, but it does happen. It does make me feel, it does give me that like tight feeling in my chest where I know, oh, this is not my truth. I just need to come down from wherever I am right now. Creativity is great, but creativity and representation and diversity can sometimes be a little bit difficult to navigate.
That feeling the whole way through. I don't think it ever goes away, to be honest, because you're on a mission to break down the stereotype, but then you're overthinking yourself and wondering, oh my God, am I creating a stereotype by accident, or am I flattening my characters or community and showing two-dimensional characters or things like that. So what gets me through something like that is, first of all, to stop overthinking it and not worry too much about that side of things, but be more concerned with the story you want told. Because there was a reason I started telling this story, and it was because it didn't exist before now. And it didn't matter if I was the first or the last person to tell this story. For me, it was, I wanted this story out, I wanted a seat at the table, I wanted my culture captured and represented. And that was the thing that got me through, was to stop overthinking and just focus on the story you want told. The second thing I'll add to that is something that I tell all writers, especially as young as 10 who start writing in schools, and it's to find your tribe. Find your writing tribe, whether it's a close friend, whether it's somebody who is a bigger reader like you, someone who's safe and someone that you can bounce off with. So before I started writing, I founded a network of readers called Readers Review about 17 years ago. And what started off as a book group coming together once a month evolved into a community of creators and authors and writers and artists. And, once a month, we try and come together as writers to sit in companionable silence and just write whatever we're working on, whether it's a short story, whether it's a book. But those sessions that we come together with, are perfect opportunities for me to bounce off ideas with people that you trust. And if you start to find yourself overthinking your characters or you're overthinking the story, that's when you take a pause and you talk to the people in your writers tribe and just bounce off those ideas. Or, as was what was said before, can you read this paragraph and tell me, have I over explained something here? Have I, done too much here, or have I done too little here? Because the idea is we want the story to be accessible worldwide. It didn't matter who was going to read it. So those safe spaces, I think, are phenomenal, and they worked perfectly for me for the last couple of years. So I highly recommend finding your tribe and finding your safe place to share those concerns with and your writing with. Readers are intelligent, so don't think you need to over explain or over translate everything. As I mentioned in my story, My Harimau King, I write in Bahasa because I wanted to retain authentic voice. But you can do that and write your story contextually, so at least by the next sentence, your reader understands what they were saying. Or you can have a glossary at the back of the book and have terms that people may have come across. It doesn't have to be another language. It could be, if you're writing from a different perspective and there's like a term that describes a certain person or a certain thing, you can have that as a term in the glossary to help explain it, but it doesn't over explain everything. Remembering that your readers are intelligent, and they would want to embrace the authentic voice.
I don't myself know, because I feel like I'm who I am. So I am an African American woman, okay? But I don't think that every character that I write needs to be African American. I live in, a community that's multicultural. I always have. So my experience is the people that I know are diverse. Okay. So therefore, I don't think that every character in my book is going to make sense if I'm writing it to be just one or whatever. It doesn't matter what I've chosen, because it's not my reality. And I like to write with a basis, like I mentioned earlier, a little bit of reality. So I don't feel that way. I'm not, again, and E mentioned this, no individual is a monolith. I can't speak for all Black people. I can't speak for all Black women. I can't speak for all Black mothers. I can't speak for anybody but me. I can talk about what I'm doing and what I do in my family, and so if I say something, and there's some, I mean, with every culture, right? There's some stuff that we all know, right? How we present that is how we present that. That's how my African American family did something. But I'm from the North. A Southern family might do something different. And I don't know what they do, and they don't know what I did. That doesn't make either one more or less valid. So I don't worry about that. My work is African American because I am. I wrote it. I'm Black. Therefore, the work is African American. Like, it can't be anything else. It can't exist any other way. I don't worry about, because you make a good point. I love what you said there, but am I flattening are you flattening your culture? Am I flattening mine? No, I'm not thinking about that. I'm giving you what I do. If you don't think that that's authentic enough, which is an old gatekeeping term, this is not authentic enough. It's like, what do you want me to have Black people do? Oh, you're thinking about the stereotype that you think you know, but that's actually a parody. We don't actually do that. No, that's just not real. Is that what you want? If that's what you are afraid that you're giving, then you need to look back at your work and say, am I doing that? And the advice I give you is be authentic to you and you'll be fine. Success is relative. What I might view as success today is different from what I viewed as success back in the beginning. But in the end, I can look back at my body of work and say, okay, I wrote this authentically. So that's what's important to me.
I do think about it sometimes. I think especially in a first draft because nobody generally sees my first drafts except me. So sometimes when I'm writing in a first draft, I'm like, is this thing that I wrote this way a problem? It might be, but I will worry about that later because this draft, I'm just telling myself the story and I'll go talk to somebody else in my community about that before I revise, and then I can worry about that. But generally speaking, I mean, that's the thing, is I do often write kind of from my own experience, like, except for the fact that he is a cisgender man, like the main character's like journey to discovering that he's queer. Like he's 43 years old and he doesn't know he's gay, and it's very obvious to the whole village that he's gay, but he doesn't know that. And like his like just his ways of telling himself that he must be into women because that's what is expected, is very similar to my own experience, like realizing that I was queer. I just didn't take quite as long as him, but I can't say anything because it still took me till adulthood. So I can't, so I do often write from my own experience. And then I do just remind myself, I'm like, my experience is not going to look like everyone's experience.
Right.
But I think it helps if, as an author, you do not claim to speak for everybody. If you're not just like, well, this is the way queer people are because I'm queer and this is the way I am. So I think as long as you're not like claiming to speak for the entirety of your community, that helps. And then if you're writing from experience, it almost feels like it's impossible to flatten, uh, at least individual characters because they're going to feel more real because you're writing from a place of like real experience. And then I also think that having, like, I always have like just a zillion, like all the characters are queer just all the time. So I think that helps as well because then you have different, like, he doesn't know that he's queer. And meanwhile, his sister is very aware that she's queer, but she's deeply, deeply closeted because of where they live. But then there's also this other woman in the story who is unapologetically, openly a lesbian and like a little bit slutty about it. And like, so they all like their attitudes about their own queerness is different. And so I think that helps as well when you have like multiple characters from your own community because they can serve as like showing different facets of the same community so that you show that like, hey, it's not flat and it's not a monolith and it's real people and they might all feel differently about things.
So I'm curious if during your writing careers, if there has ever been a time when a choice around representing a particular identity ever came into friction during the process, either during the publishing and editorial process or with readers, and how you dealt with that, if at all.
Yeah, so if I can, so I may be answering this not the way we're thinking because I'm going to go with my own identity, but it was like before I knew what my identity was. So I often would write characters when I was younger who like felt and thought the way that I did. And then I would get feedback from people that in retrospect I assume were like cishet and like neurotypical. And the feedback would always be stuff like nobody thinks like this and nobody feels like this. And I was just like, okay, I guess I'm just weird then, which was not, I mean, that was like normal. Like I was like, I'm non-binary, but at the time I was like, I was the weird girl growing up. So I was just like, okay, I guess this is just me and nobody's going to relate to this because it's just something weird about me. And I would just like quietly change it based on feedback. And then as I got older and I began to like get to know more people from these communities and be like, hey, maybe this is my community and that's why I feel and think this way. Like now if I get that feedback, especially from someone who does not share my identity, I'm like, thanks so much for your feedback. And then I ignore it because I'm like, this is like, now I understand that that feedback is coming from a place of like, we do not share a community and you don't think anybody thinks or feels this way, but like literally I do. So somebody does because I do. In terms of writing other identities, I think friction's probably a strong word. But I do sometimes, like I have a diverse friend group, and so sometimes I will get feedback from friends who are part of communities that I'm not, and they'll just be like, "Hey, we think you need to consider this character more or differently because they don't feel as developed as the other characters who are in your own community, or perhaps it's leaning into a stereotype that I either wasn't aware of or like I just leaned into a stereotype and kind of didn't notice myself doing it." And so then that feedback I obviously do take because it's not my community, and I can't be like, "No, you're wrong," because it is not my place to say that, I think, in that case. So in that case, I will re-examine how I've written a character and look at my friends' notes if they've given me any. Sometimes I'll bring in a sensitivity reader because I'm not going to like make my friends do that extra work. Like that's like they beta read for me, but like it's not their job to provide like a full sensitivity read, and that should be paid work anyway. So there's no friction per se, but yeah, there have been just like disconnects between what I have written and what people take from it, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, I think friction's that's more than what I experienced. I mean, it's a difficult word to really apply, but I do have a story about what happened once. So I wrote a story, and in it, the woman was getting a perm, and in the Black community, the perm straightens your hair. Okay. So she was getting a bone straight perm, which is like just straight hair. And it is called bone straight. It's not written on anything, but when you want your perm to be bone straight, you leave it in there a little longer. I mean, this is what it is, right? And so I wrote this in there. And that was the only thing that came back in the edit. Nothing's called bone straight, and this what is bone straight, and this is wrong. And I'm like, you're telling me, don't tell me I'm sitting here with a bone straight perm right now. Like, don't tell me. So I just took a picture of myself and said, this is bone straight. And it's because they didn't know. I get it, but it's like also, yeah, I mean, that was a little specific. If I said it specifically, that was really specific. I probably knew what I was talking about. Just let it go. Sorry about it, because I think that, but that was a while ago. I wonder if that would have happened now. I think the world is a little bit different in publishing now that I'm not sure that anyone would have challenged that. Which is good and bad, right? I mean, I in that instance, I knew what I was talking about. But what if I didn't know what I was talking about? No one challenges you now because I don't know. But I did know that one. But I know what I'm talking about, and so will any Black person that reads this. So let's just move on.
I cannot 100% say honestly that I set out to be a representative of my marginalized community. I knew that I was writing with intent because I was writing people that I know. I was writing people of color. I was writing characters and in a world that I know and that is marginalized. I knew that. But when I wrote my first book, Pretty Average, this was a few years ago, and I sent it off to be published with all my audacity. None of this was on my radar. It was more, that's just who I am. I'm writing this. I'm not, my intent wasn't to be a representative. So with that came this certain level of cultural pressure, of pressure from like family and friends and other people in the space to say that, you are an ambassador for the characters you are writing. I am the person that is going to be having to answer these types of questions. And I realized then in that moment that I needed to know exactly what I stand for, what it means to me, how important is this? And it was really important to me. It still is. I just didn't have a plan. There was no intent. So when I was having these types of conversations, it wasn't on a platform like this. It was with other authors or readers or friends and family, in different spaces. And I had to become a lot more intentful about the message that I'm giving out. And I had to be 100% comfortable with what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. Because at the end of the day, I'm writing these stories and then they are going to go to readers. And readers have expectations, especially in romance, right? I was hesitant. I was worried about the fact that another reader, another Desi reader may feel that I misrepresented them. And it's it's a difficult space to be in. It is a responsibility, but I always go back to the lived experience. I don't have the same experiences of somebody else, but I can still have empathy. I can still be aware of what's going on in the world around me. We can still be flawed beings. The characters can still be flawed. So by not overthinking it, I think I'm gonna use that because I do overthink things a lot. I If I had harmed somebody in my writing, I think I would have known it by the time it had reached the reader. And I firmly believe this. It doesn't matter who my characters are, what colors on the cover, what language I'm using, what names they have, what surnames they have, what religions they have, where they are in the country. A story is a story, a character is a character. If you read it, you enjoy it. But if I'm bringing harm to you or my community, then that is a difficult thing. So I had to be very firm about what I stand for, what my ideas are, what I am like when I'm speaking to my colleagues, like everybody on this panel, what I'm aligning myself with and what I want to bring to the party. Once I had reached that, it was friction free. I'm going to use that word.
For me, and this is probably going to sound very pretentious of me to say this, I went into writing my story friction free because I knew from the beginning this was an own voice story. This was, loosely based on me as a character. It was a culture that I'm in tune with, and I had family around me that could correct me if I was wrong. I had family that I could go to and ask questions about, especially like my only sort of concern was to, making sure I was respectful and retaining the accurate memory of my royal ancestor as I wrote him into a fiction story and the like, and also getting the Bahasa Sunda correct, because that's a work in progress for me, because I'm a lot more fluent in Bahasa Indonesian than I am in Sunda. So I walked into it, friction free, because in my mind I knew, look, reading is subjective. I was a reader blogger before I became a writer, and for me personally, not everyone's going to like your book. So don't have this expectation that the whole world is going to embrace your book. There will be someone that might not find it's for them. That's totally fine. I find books that are not for me either. I wouldn't publicly disdain a book because I know the pressure and the process that one goes through to get published, but not all reading is for everybody. So I'm respectful of that. So it's just in my mind I figured, look, just write the story, like I said before, write the story you wanted told. But then you've got the added layer, of course, of your beta readers, whatever you call them. And, they're phenomenal because they pick out the flaws, or they pick out the holes in your story, or something that may, look controversial in the future. You might want to address this, or you might want to flesh this out. And what do you mean by this? And, make it more accessible and the like. So again, it's, knowing that you've got that support network around you through your beta readers, your editors, your safe space, which is your writers tribe. So I guess the thing I would tell people in this regard is, if you feel like you want to go ahead and represent yourself in some way, shape, or form, but you're concerned about a friction that might come to the story, put that at the back of your mind, because that's when you start overthinking. Just tell the story you want written. That's why you've got your tribe. That's why you've got your beta readers who can pick out things before it gets to the shelf. Before you see some publicly, posted review about, oh, this thing was harmful, or this person misrepresented this, etc. That's why you've got your support network to help you along the way. You're not in this alone.
So to end, I would love for you all to, I guess, have space to speak directly to readers. So for readers who want to support your work, want to support authors who may be writing non-normative stories or characters who represent a lot of different identities, what advice do you have for them to support you and to kind of maybe read more broadly?
If I could say so myself, the readers who are tuning into the Right Hive annual conference, you are off to a fantastic start in broadening your TBR, because all of the authors on these panels across the board have got phenomenal books that you definitely need to add to your TBR, or to be read piles. Reading broadly is imperative as a writer, as a reader, even for me. I work in the corporate world Monday to Friday, so I read a lot of middle grade fantasy books to get into the vernacular of a preteen, because there's no way a 12-year-old would say pertaining to kind regards as I do in my emails Monday to Friday. So it is imperative to get into the mindset of your characters with if you are looking to read in the area in which you're writing. That's not to say that's going to disrupt your creative flow. This is just so you can have an authentic 13-year-old kid in your story if that's what you're writing. So reading widely for knowledge, but also writing, it does help with that creative flow and constructing a character. If I can also share as well that I've exhibited at Oz Comic Con as an author, and I've done various events in Sydney, and I've just done one in Melbourne recently. And I'm absolutely delighted to report that each event that I've done was sold out. I sold out my stock in each place that I've gone to. What that tells me, as exciting as that is that there is an appetite for a diverse voice in literature, or in fantasy at least, especially when I'm having conversations with new readers or connecting with new people and telling them this is an Indonesian, or Indonesian mythology that's in a time travel fantasy that starts in Western Sydney and goes back to ancient Indonesia. And you've got mythology in there, you've got creatures, you've got folklore, but it's also a story of prophecy. It's a story about a character trying to stop a prophecy from coming true before it can wipe out her entire family line, connecting with your ancestry, connecting with your culture. This is something different. I still have conversations with people telling me I've never seen, a hijabi on the front cover of a book, or I haven't seen an Indonesian, mythology, or I haven't seen this and that and the other. There are, Muslim representation and hijabi girls on the cover and things like that. It's just a matter of knowing where to find them. And so good places to start are places like here, but also talking to your libraries as well. And of course, social media holders, if you're over the age of 16, connect with us. Authors are social. We love to connect with new readers. And at the same time, I'm just so thankful that with the new readers that I have had in this journey of My Harimau King, the readers are asking for more. And I never intended to write a follow-up with My Harimau King, but I've started working on one because of the readers. But also don't be afraid to read something that's out of your comfort zone as well, because books are meant to be thought-provoking as well. So if you've never picked up a book but you think it's interesting, yeah, give it a go as well. And if you're one of those people who say, "Oh, I don't like reading. I'm not sure if I found the right book," it's because you haven't found the right book yet. Because I'm pretty sure that if you found the right book, you will start love reading as well.
The first thing I say, this is my default for everything. If I don't know something, I'm going to Google it. I'm going to go into my little bar and I'm going to, what are the latest releases in the South Asian romance space? And that is the starting point. I swear it's the easiest way to find the books that you want to write. So find them, find the authors, learn about them. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Threads, there's multitudes of us all over the place. Find us, and you may not even be aware of what you are looking for until you start listening to people and you start opening up your awareness to diversifying your books. If you are in a bookstore and you pick up a book, unfortunately, out of the 100 that may be on a shelf, there may be 2 that are representative. And read those books, look at the blurbs, find what you enjoy, listen to what your other readers are saying, listen to what's happening in your book club or in the chats, the community chats. And then once you've found the type of stories that you like, once you are aware of it, your whole world opens up and you'll realize there are so many stories, so many different stories that you will just you'll get overwhelmed by how amazing it is, but you've got the rest of your life to read it, right? Follow the authors, buy their books, leave the reviews, and all of these things are signaling to the author and to the industry that there's interest in the book. So if we perpetuate that negative cycle, we are going to be going through this for the next 10 years and 20 years and 30 years, and all the hundreds of years of flattening and stereotypes and breaking down these walls that everybody is going through is going to be for naught. Nobody's saying that you have to stop reading what you enjoy. All we're saying is broaden your horizons a little bit. Find the things that you like, and you learn from it. I just recently read a book where the female main character is neurodivergent, and her interiority helped me understand Friends on a vastly different level than I would have just from the conversations I'm having. And I'm now blown wide open. Like, cannot believe how much I know right now. So allow yourself the freedom to do that.
So I sort of accidentally partially answered this earlier, which is again like, but let us assume that you're like, I can't find anything. And like, you really mean it in good faith and you want to read more broadly. Like, again, many people have already done that work for you. There are so many stories by just a whole variety of marginalized identities. Like I just saw on Instagram, I've seen like 3 separate posts of like indigiqueer books where it's like indigenous queer authors and their books, and it'd be like a dozen books per post. Like the books are out there and people have put together lists for you. You just have to go look for those books in those lists. Just type in an identity and be like books by such and such people, and you are gonna find them. And I guarantee you will find them in a genre you like. Like there will be something. I promise. There will be something.
Exactly what he said. And if you're a writer, just keep writing. Just keep doing it. And I know that sounds so like loose and just like a throwaway answer, but it's really not. It's the honest answer. If you don't write, then there is less material out there for people to look for. Just period. Your words don't get out there. Whatever group you want to show representation for is not being represented by your voice. Someone else may be doing it, but no one can tell the same story you're going to tell. So just keep doing it. But don't, I mean, if you want to be published, write and submit. Don't just write and then look at it. You've got to write and submit it. Do the thing. If it is calling to you, do the thing. Just do it. You are not disappointing anybody but yourself if you don't.
To wrap up, I want to give space for all of you to give our audience any final thoughts on the topic, but also shout out where they can find your work, anything else you'd like to highlight.
This one, I did it right again. I have The Lord of the Wood. It's coming out like 10 days after this airs, which is awesome. It is queer cozy horror about a lonely clockmaker who meets the hero of his childhood bedtime stories, the Lord of the Wood, after getting lost in an enchanted forest. But instead of the mythical figure of his dreams, he finds a grim man turning slowly into a beast and losing power over a dying forest. So they have to save the forest or he will lose the man he's falling for and he'll never see his family again. And then out currently, I have a queer cozy fantasy called The Keeper of Lonely Spirits. It is about an old man cursed with immortality who hunts ghosts rather than making mortal friends who will die one day until residents of an Ohio town beset by a vengeful spirit adopt him against his will. And he has to decide whether to stay and protect their lives or leave to protect his heart. So that's what I have out now. My website is elizmanderson.com, and I am Eliz M. Anderson on any social media site that I am on. Come find me, come follow me. I never shut up on Blue Sky. So if you want to hear a lot from me, that is where to find me.
I'm going to try to point. Oh, I did it too, but I got my finger on it. Because I was like, what side is it on? I really was sitting there stressing about that. Okay. So I am Elmarie Wood. My website is elmariewood.com. You will find me on social media that same way. But if you go to Elmarie Wood at the very bottom, you'll find all of my social media links. This is the book one. The Tryst is the book one of my 5-book Slipstream series, which is a surprise to me as well. Right? I don't know how I came up with 5 books, but it's done. But we're doing rapid release this year. So all 5 of them come out this year. We're already moving towards book 3, which comes out on July 14th. So this is just the overarching, and let me quickly say Slipstream is literally slipping in between genres. So you get the mix of, at least from my perspective, psychological horror, science fiction, very little bit of fantasy, but there's mystery, suspense, and thriller all throughout. So book 1 is heavy on the romance elements, which I forgot to mention a second ago. Heavy romance elements, which was interesting for the horror author in me to write. And book 2 is very, very heavy on the psychological horror. So you'll get different pieces, but the overarching story, and I'll give you the tagline of it really quickly, is that love always finds a way, but sometimes that way is paved with bones. So that I'm just going to drop that right there. The other thing that I talked about that's coming out in just a couple days on June 6th is If It's the Birds, We're in Trouble. This is my dystopian epistolary novella. There is no narrative. It is like one of those puzzle boxes. You know those boxes you buy in this, with games, and you have to solve the mystery and find out who killed who or what happened in this. This is what that is, and it was like the most exciting thing to put together. So much fun. Can you figure out what happened in Rothwood? Because something did.
I think this entire conversation with all of us here, there's the things, think about the words that we've said and that we are trying to make you aware of and that you are probably aware of, and just like dig a little bit, do a little bit of self-reflection and think about what representation means to you personally. You know what it means to us, and you know what it means in the collective. But what does it mean to you? How important is it to you? And why is it important to you? Those thoughts and coming to that understanding is going to help you, if whether you're a writer, reader, or anybody in the space at all. I am firmly a firm believer in speaking out and having conversations about this. You can check out my website. So it's Arini Vlotman, www.arinivlotman.co.za. You can find me on Instagram, Arini_author. That is my handle everywhere. So Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Threads is usually where I am most of the time. I am on Goodreads at the moment. I've got a series, a contemporary romance series of rom-coms, pretty average, pretty bossy, pretty unexpected, pretty complicated, that were published, but they're currently down at the moment, unfortunately. We are going to a bigger, wider publisher, and we are releasing that on a much bigger landscape. But sign up for my newsletter, connect with me, and we will talk to me. I really, if you haven't noticed by now, I love talking. So yeah, just reach out. Tell me what you think. Tell me whether you disagree with me. Tell me what you're reading right now, and I'll pick it up and maybe we could buddy read. But thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been amazing.
Oh, it has been an absolute phenomenon being part of this conversation. The conversation was absolutely sparkling. The one thing I would leave with you with regards to representation, as it's been mentioned, you understand what it means to me personally, what it means to the rest of the panel. So maybe think about what it means to you. And imagine a world where you weren't seen. Imagine you walked into something that, had absolutely no representation of who you are. Are you connected? Do you feel that you are validated? And see, I guess what that means to you and how representation can affect you in the media you consume. And if you are like myself, where you have longed to find something that represented your culture or who you are as a person, and you've not seen that on the shelves, perhaps that's your calling to maybe pick up the pen and write your own story and write and voice and amplify your own voice through a story. So that's the biggest advice I could give on that topic. I'm someone who loves to chat too. I could chat to you all day. I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram. So my handle is Neng, Neng, Annie, Annie, Menulis, Menulis, which is Bahasa for writer. So Neng Annie Writer. And disclosure, Neng is a term of endearment, West Javanese young girls. So Neng Annie Menelis. And I think that's the same on my TikTok, but I think I need to go there a little bit more. I'm more on Instagram than I am on TikTok. I am published by a small press publisher called Melby Rose Publishing. So you can also go to their website, www.melbyrosepublishing.com, and you can find my book, My Haremao King, on there. There's a link there called Shop Now, and you can find everywhere where it's located, on Amazon, but also you can download it as an ebook as well, or you can just go to your local bookstore, support local business, and you can just request a copy and they will find it for you as well, or even go to your library and ask for them to get a copy in for you. That's another way you could support authors as well. Thank you so much, Writehive, for having me. This is amazing. Thank you.
Thanks again to all of you, and also to our audience and the many amazing volunteers who make the Writehive conference possible. There are many other amazing panels happening, so be sure to check them out, and have a good rest of your day.